because it's been on the market for.
Right, but I'm just wondering as far as like rolling out sod, that's a big difference in impact. So, it's different than the current brush line, I guess.
Well, I mean, that area can and will be maintenance mode. I mean, it's an existing, it is shrubs and brush along the edge, and, there's nothing currently that would prevent them from reestablishing the lawn that was, historically has been there. The existing house has been there for a long time. I'm not sure how many decades, but it goes a ways back. They're not proposing any irrigation on this plan. Probably overseed, but we're not proposing fertilizer or irrigation as part of this filing.
So I guess that's one, Jeff, because it is right by a wetland, like so close. Is that one we can make sure that the landscaper, whoever is installing our conditioning, knows that the BMP is in place and that they should maybe submit a soil sample as part of them following the BMP?
You can certainly require whatever you feel necessary to meet performance standards and meet the interests that are there.
I think maybe that's something we should require as part of these conditions, is saying the BMP requires soil testing for these spots, so if you're doing this, please submit that.
Required to be submitted.
What, is there language in the current BMP that requires a soil sample in more sensitive areas yet?
No, the only soil sample that's required under the BMP is for use of phosphorus.
Phosphorus, yeah, because the nitrogen part is
But
pretty
you have to do
meaningless.
it.
Right.
You can't use phosphate on your lawn until you do.
Correct.
Right.
Regardless of where, but I'm
You have to
seeing-
demonstrate a
Test
need
shows.
for the use of phosphorus.
Yeah,
And that's all built into the BMPs, yes?
right.
That is.
Yes, and our order of conditions says you will comply with the BMPs.
Mhm.
Right.
But the question is, do they?
Right. I think it's part of the follow-up
Well,
process.
yeah, I think that does exist, but I want to also be thoughtful about, and we can do order of conditions when we get to it. But for instance, we have, and the Board of Health has Title V and local regulations for septic systems, and we don't then call out individual ones redundantly and say, make sure we do this, make sure you're expected to comply with them. That's all part of that's sort of part of what we do. And it has the force of the order by saying that.
Right. Yeah, I think we can write in like we normally do. This has to follow the BMP guidelines.
Well, the BMP has been adopted into our regulations,
Yeah.
so you have to do it whether you want to or not.
And then how we follow up and enforce that, I'm right with you on, we should be doing
Yeah.
whatever we need to do
I think
that.
especially when these, a property like this has a big project before us. It's not like a general property that's just going about their general fertilizing in a bad area, which I think we all know is happening. So the fact that they're already before us, I think there should be a different, or at least a level of commitment to the BMP. And I know we say they're supposed to follow it, but a statement back saying that they are.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's good.
Well, sometimes for septic systems too, we say, well, the Board of Health requires these tests anyway, so shoot us a copy. So you could say, well, the BMPs require a phosphate test anyway, so when you do it, just make sure we get a copy so that, if we do get more enforcement.
Well, we can take all this up when we do the order.
Yeah.
They only
Yeah.
require that if you're proposing to use phosphorus.
Right. Yeah, in other words, just as a connection, you're already having to do it anyway, not asking anything new.
But if you're not proposing to use phosphates, if you're just going to drop some grass seed and walk away, and
Yeah, then you shouldn't have to do it. Other than that, any questions?
Anything from the public on Skirka? Anything else? Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I just, for the record, that's on Mark Wickham. I looked at the boundary 2 weeks ago and talked to Mark about it, and it's fine, so the boundary is okay, it's fine. And the only other concern, which is why I didn't write a report for you guys, is that we are raising the grade a couple feet where the house is going, and so there's a lot of disturbance of fill, and it should not be actually already mentioned the concerns about stabilizing that side slope because it's pretty steep down into the marsh. Otherwise, they meet regulations.
They meet the standards?
Excuse me?
They meet the standards?
There's a 25-foot rooster buffer, and all structures are outside of 50 feet, so from that buffer zone standards, they're being met.
I have to add, it's a particularly wonderful wetland line. I know Brian enjoyed flagging it. I enjoyed picking it up with the GPS, and Bruce, I'm sure, enjoyed confirming it. It's really nice in there.
Oh, really? What is it?
Cat briar problem.
Yeah, Greenbrier?
That's why I was down in there in the fall.
Just enough grape to really get you all tangled
Oh,
up nicely, too. That's a gem.
Well, if there's nothing else, from the public?
No?
Do we have what we need to close this one?
Nope.
Jeff?
No, it's a winning for natural
We're not
heritage.
waiting for heritage. Okay, so would you like to continue?
I'd like to continue to the next hearing, please.
Unless I hear an objection from the commission, we'll continue this to the 8th of July. Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Go to the-
Okay, now we ready for,
Nope, let's go to number 9 first.
okay, so that's still a town of Nantucket, 34 Washington Street. I don't see a file number on this one. Did that come in? No file number.
Unfortunately, no. We can still hear it. Get questions?
Is this the new dredging?
Yes. You guys are going to get started.
Good evening. My name is David Smith with GZA Geo Environmental. I was before the commission here a couple months ago with the storm damage repair project to the town pier. This is a result of the January blizzard storm event, which created quite a bit of damage to the town pier itself and also to the adjacent timber floats. So this is a kind of a phase 2 of this project. Over the years, the town has been susceptible to storm damage at this location. They've constantly have to repair these timber floats after major storm events, and this last one was an exceptional repair and replacement of these floats. So what we're looking to do is to replace the timber floats along the south side of the facility, right along here. Replace the timber ones with more robust heavy-duty concrete floats. They're going to be replaced within the same footprint, same size, same main float, and same fingers, with the exception of this outer finger that is currently a 3-foot by 25-foot finger. We're going to replace that with an 8-foot wide by 30-foot finger to kind of give it, this is the first line of defense right here is this float, so we want to make this a little bit more robust. In addition to replacing these floats, the 16 timber pressure-treated guy piles that anchor each of these fingers along the south side, and also the four timber piles along the main float right at the gangway location will be removed. The 8 steel 14-inch diameter piles that currently anchor the float system will be removed, extended in height, and also reused in the new with the new concrete floats to anchor the fingers. And then we're going to be providing 22 additional 16-inch diameter steel piles, concrete filled, to be able to anchor the whole system. So net result is, we're going to remove 16 timber piles, relocate 8 existing steel piles, and add 22 new piles. The gangway and pier, all the fixed structures are going to remain. It's really just the timber floats that are going to be redone. So because we're replacing the timber floats with concrete, they have more draft. Depending on the manufacturer, it could be up to 2 feet. So in this area, on the landward side, this drawing here, you can see where the shaded area is. We want to be able to maintain enough separation distance from the bottom of the concrete float to the mud line. At extreme low tide events, we want to maintain 1.5 feet. So in order to do that, we need to dredge out approximately 1,180 cubic yards of material over an area of about 15,000 square feet. That material is, we tested it, had it analyzed, and it's a fine sand, no contaminants. There was different options we went back and forth on in the town, but as a result is because of the low volume quantity, we're going to dredge that area, dewater it on site onto the barge, bring it over to the steamship pier, offload it onto trucks, and then brought to the landfill. And they're going to just stockpile it there, the town is. So as far as work procedure is, the existing floats are going to be removed, the piles are going to be removed, they're going to come in and dredge, drive the new piles, and install the floats.
Is this all winter time?
Yeah, this is going to be, because of, we're going to have time of year restrictions because of the dredging. So this is probably going to occur between November 1st and January, probably January 15th, yeah.
For winter flounder, you've got...
For winter flounder, I don't think it's, we're going to make this season to do it because of funding and also maybe because of permitting, but we're looking at 2016, 2017 season to get this done.
So when you did the, I'm sorry, you might still be talking.
Nope, I think I'm done.
When you did this sampling for probably sieve analysis for the fine sand, did you also do a survey for benthic creatures? Do you have eelgrass?
We did not. The eelgrass maps, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but it's further offshore from here as far as the delineation. I know that was brought up when we were doing the storm damage repairs here for when we redid the breakwater. The eelgrass map showed the eelgrass offshore here, but we haven't done a survey as part of this.
That's correct.
Since we asked for Great Harbor to do that, I was wondering if there, so we have information already for this?
We have a map.
For that area, yes,
Yeah.
for when they redid the breakwaters there, that it showed all of the eelgrass being towards me from the end of the period.
Okay.
So, not clear back.
Correct. Well, I think, too, that's,
East of the wave fence, or north.
yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're recent enough where we feel confident.
Correct, and then we'll also be remapping the harbor this summer as well.
Should that be refiled, like with this, just to make sure it's...
Maybe, yeah, it might be good to include the reference to that mapping or something, because we're usually very tough on everybody that's doing any kind of floats, and we should be for the town just as much as a private, you know.
Just to make sure there's nothing.
And sometimes
significant.
eelgrass comes back, so.
This is fairly shallow here right now, and you can go out there at low tide, and even, I think the corner of this timber float actually probably hits bottom. So you can pretty much see right down the bottom
Right,
there
you
in those
can walk
locations,
along.
yeah. Maybe not so much out in the deeper section, but
At one
certainly
time, there was
the way we do it.
quahogs and surf clams, and there was a fair amount of gathering in that area.
Well, I think that's something, too, is we're going to be waiting for a file number to close, so I think in the interim 2 weeks before we do, I think between the old stuff and some other information, I'm sure there's information that can get provided to.
Yeah, that would
Did
be-
you?
I know when they're jetting in those surf clams, there was a big question.
I did get a file. Did you not get a file number?
We didn't get them.
I did not. It may have come in today. I can look it up.
It
Yeah,
was,
so that-
issued yesterday.
So that would be my only question, is to make sure we're not
Mhm.
doing some nice industrial surf climbing. It helps that it's in winter time, it should be, and it is really shallow there, it's probably a long-term benefit, actually, to dredge that.
Mhm.
There's contamination issues, different from steel versus timber, but.
You said you were going to barge this?
That's correct.
Where's the barge, is the barge going to sit out on the end?
Yeah, well, the barge will have to come in and work their way in to be able to dig this area. You could do it two methods. One, they'll have a barge with probably an excavator and a clamshell bucket and either a dredge scow or some other associated barge, or they'll do it on that same barge itself, work their way in, dredge it, dewater it here on site. We're going to have turbidity curtains around the site, and then once it dries out, then it's going to be transported over the steamship here.
Is that correct? I do have a phone number. Sorry, that just came in my email before the meeting.
Where did you get a phone number?
Yep, it's 2798.
This is something we have to run by NMFS, National Marine Fisheries.
No, it's something, it's been sent off to the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Yeah, they sent the comment letter back
Yes, we just got it yesterday.
yesterday afternoon, yeah.
Is it in our packets?
No, we literally just got it.
Okay.
Is Army Corps
I think
I would
they
think
need
that
to,
that-
yeah, but I
Yeah.
definitely want to see.
We're also filing a combined 401 water quality and a Chapter 91 for this, and an Army Corps permit. So both of those have been submitted already.
So they call this an eelgrass bed according to the Division of Marine Fisheries and winter flounder habitat. Whereas the time of year restriction, they recommend an eelgrass survey be conducted prior to dredging. During the peak eelgrass growing season, July, September, should include mapping of the extent of the bed, which can be done by divers, and the quality of the bed. And if they have loss of eelgrass, it should be mitigated. I mean, those are all standard conditions.
If they're not going to get around to it, then
They were
we
worried
should
about.
have time to do the surveys and.
They should, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say this time next year, yeah. They were concerned about crop dredge and shellfish and eelgrass too, like I said, the sucker weighted dredge stuff. And fuel spills is probably going to have a lot more boom material. There's not adequate boom material right now in the area for, so that's something that I'm sure they'll have you do.
Well, they'll have spill kits and whatever means on the barge itself for that, and then that's for that issue, but the turbidity current will go around the...
Right, two
perimeter
different
of the
issues.
work.
I
Two
just know
different-
the town doesn't
Yeah.
have enough
I got you. Right.
on site. They're enough in general. No, they're lucky. Yeah, can we get a copy of, I just
Yeah, well,
pass this around now.
We'll get it around. Literally,
Yeah.
it came in
Oh, I believe it.
today.
No, the DMF had the same questions I would have. They're standard.
Yep, they are.
Anything else from the commission or anything from the public on the town?
Nothing from the public?
Yeah, Ms. McKinnon. Show me words for a second.
Yeah, I was making sure she's awake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I guess I don't know if this is planning to get continued or closed tonight. I'm just sort of trying to understand the recommendations from DMF about a survey and mitigation. And if you are going to close it tonight, I just would be interested in hearing more about how you would address that, because I would just be concerned about a survey getting done and how that would be mitigated for and how that could be addressed in the conditions if the permit was going to be issued prior to the survey.
Well, that's a good question. Maybe we probably should hold it open for, if it's not a big rush, I didn't think this had to be started like next week, or we should at least see the letter. Is there anything else that's come in other than the letter?
Nope.
I
That's
would
it.
hold it open just for that, so everyone could look through that.
And then they can put the eelgrass survey.
They can
you know,
include
at
the
least one
eelgrass
that they
survey,
have.
and then, yeah, we should just, request that there be an eelgrass survey done this time next year, and reported to us, I guess, before construction?
Before
Well, that could be as a condition.
Yeah, that could be a
Correct.
condition. Yeah, no, I'm not saying we would wait to issue, but we do, I agree with Ms. McKenna.
And
We
that's
should
fine.
have a
We can
good
do that.
plan
Yep.
in place so that we physically see the survey and.
Sure,
and,
that's no problem.
I would probably do a couple of benthographs or cohogs or, Tara might have some. Did she
We have a
see
little bit
this?
of information. Yes.
Okay. In the past, you guys have actually issued a letter of support or letter of concern or letter.
Yeah, we usually wait. This is part of the problem with the DMF letter coming. We usually wait until we
Hear them.
hear what they have to say.
Yeah,
Um,
and see if you agree or not.
correct. Or if there's something that they're looking for that we may have,
Mm-hmm.
to provide that. So.
And what's going on? They haven't said yet, or?
No,
No,
we
we
just
just got it.
received it this morning.
So DMF just sent that. Normally Tara and Jeff, they review DMF's comments officially, especially for a town project, and they say, yeah, this is a good idea, no, there's no regret, whatever. So I'd feel more comfortable leaving it open until I saw their comments, and we all got a chance to read that. and we had a good plan for the order of conditions. Those are all my only concerns. I think it's stuff that probably needs to be done. It's just
Yeah, it's
gonna
normal stuff that we would always require,
We
really.
require Great Harbor use, and
Yeah, yeah. Everybody else, we would ask them to do that.
Anything else from the public or from the commission?
The one potential, if they displace a bunch of cohogs or eelgrass where they're making that one pier bigger, that might, that's a bigger, the only place that's a bigger footprint, right, is the 8 by 30?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah, in the outer part, in the
Yeah.
deeper part.
Substantial surface area drainage.
That'll be a mitigation.
That's the only place where if they, that would be the only actual
Definitely
permanent displacement? Yeah, yeah. So if they did a survey right around that footprint and they said, well, yeah, we've got 4 cohogs per square meter, then they got to have.
So we're suggesting continue this on?
Yeah.
This is in fairly deep water though out here, so I'm not interested in
Yeah.
over here, but, I mean, you have at least 12 feet of water here at low tide.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the additional square footage here is really going to have an impact on benefit. Because you're so high up, you got such a separation distance.
You'd be surprised. I mean, everybody else in that same depth of water, we would ask them.
Applicant is okay with continuing, or doesn't want to? Well,
I'd rather close, but, no, we can continue, that's fine. Like I said, I'm not in a big, we're not going to do it this winter coming up, so.
Or next week, I was worried. When I saw this come back, I'm like, oh. It's
Right.
Well, something too, I mean, if it's to the commission's liking, I mean, we can certainly draft a positive order for next time too, and get everyone a chance to review that information and
That
then
sounds reasonable. Yeah,
try
I
to
think
issue
that's
at the next
probably-
meeting too.
I do ask Tara just to take a look
Yeah,
at it.
absolutely.
I just would feel more comfortable. Your guys usually, well, that's standard practice for anything.
Yeah, I mean, she's looked at it already, she just didn't have anything to
Well,
add,
even in
which
the
might have
past,
to
you
do
guys
it.
just submitted a couple paragraphs that said, we know this is here, this isn't there. Some of those areas are really requiring eelgrass, so actually pretty clean water right there.
So all the issues are on the table, so we don't have to do this again?
I think so.
Okay, so would you like to continue for 2 weeks, or are you willing to continue for 2 weeks? Okay, so unless there's an objection from the commission, we'll continue this till the 8th.
And Mr. Chairman,
Right, thank you.
while we're continuing, the other town application number 7 has also requested a continuance for till the 8th.
So that one got continued.
Yes.
Okay, so that concludes the notices. So then we go to amended orders of conditions. By the way,
a bunch of meters revving up on foot.
yeah, I wonder why all the heavy engines are
Yeah,
here tonight.
Stop your engines.
Putt, 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 putt.
Yeah, if this takes 10 hours, you guys
I can't get very long here, so I don't know what we said.
I thought we kind of resolved it. I mean,
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Stan Humphries with LEC and Barry Fogel on behalf of the applicant. Last week, we submitted a letter to the commission that summarizes the existing conditions with respect to the 11 conditions that were set by the commission, and then clarified and expanded on the request for the amendment on the second page. as a result of the site visit that we had conducted with the commission. What you have before you are a set of a two-plan set showing in plan view the as-built conditions, as well as a cross-section with the as-built conditions. The survey that extends 250 yards to the north and south, or east and west, whatever orientation you want to have. And then on the plan view is a little bit more of a clarification of the drain area and the nourishment area that are proposed actions to be taken with respect to the enforcement order and the request for the amendment. Rather than go through everything in detail, I thought if the commission has reviewed the letter, we can address your most urgent concerns and go from there.
I have a question just from our site visit about water infiltration up top.
The drainage?
Yep, the drainage. And did anyone ever try like getting a rain garden or something here that you would actually help infiltrate some of that water on site instead of just moving it away?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But the proposal you have is to remove all the pipe to that basin. Oh, you mean, was there ever?
Right, just the water's an issue. I'm just wondering about
Manage
the
the
water,
water,
managing the water, right. So, you know, it's still going to be there, pipe or not, so we'll probably just go over.
Well, what I was about to say is that in the letter you see there's a proposal to plant some shrubs right there at the east side of the basin to create a boundary so that any water surcharging in that basin would re-infiltrate rather than running sheet into that the area that was open. And then reseeding that area where the pipe was, so vegetation will be restored there. So the idea is that if there ever is any water that comes out of that catch basin, it stays on the ground and recharges in that area and does not run off. So functions as a recharge area rather than an outlet for flow.
So you are adding shrubs then to help, that will help infiltrate the water on
Right,
site.
exactly. Yep, in that area.
And seed the area as well, so that that's not an area to pass through. There's already an access to the stairs at another location. So where we entered
Right,
on
that's
that
where
drain,
it
that's
kind of
not the main
discharges. But the
Right.
water, if I'm correct, the water was coming from this
Higher
building
elevation.
addition. Right, so if the water's coming from over here, it's just, you know, a question. It's not, I'm not fully with this enforcement order.
This is kind of a different, I just reread through the letter. There's several letters from you guys, but this is the June 19th letter.
Correct.
Right. So in that, you propose to keep the linear fence, but remove the top 6 to 8 inches of the fence slats to be even with the tops of the, I wouldn't agree with keeping that fence, a linear fence. In front of the entire thing. They're saying to keep a linear, we haven't agreed, allow the linear fence to be placed in front of a coastal engineering structure in 20 years? 10 years?
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we might stick to our meeting protocols here and we get an understanding of what's being proposed before we get into arguing about what we would and would not permit and hear from the abutters. We've got a whole bunch of people here that are going to have things to say. If we can just sort of focus on what's being proposed.
Which he just said in this letter.
And then get into our, what we might and might not favor. I think we're a little outside of our protocols on that.
Well,
It's a 2-page letter. I'm just referring to what's in this letter here, which
I'm
is all we're
referring to the
discussing.
protocols as they're printed and adopted by the commission.
okay, Mike, it's,
Okay, everybody, Mr. Chairman. We have
I think
to conduct
you
this according to.
specifically asked our opinion of the,
Yes, you are correct that the letter submitted on behalf of our client, he asked us to ask for that entire area to be approved, that fence to be approved with that change. After you've heard from everyone and you get into your discussion of it, we'd be happy to respond to comments or questions of the kind you just raised. In case it didn't come through clearly, but the original amendment talked about extending the tube under the stairs on the east. That's been withdrawn. And the proposal that you see is that as part of the nourishment, to have like a robust chunk of the nourishment material put at that end each time there's nourishment. So that extension of the tubes, if it wasn't clear, it should have been, but it is no longer part of the amendment request. I don't know if that came through clearly.
Right, yeah, no, that's a good point. And then 25 cubic yards would be provided at the northeast end of existing tubes. So
Right.
That's
That's right.
number
That's
3
Of
of
the
the
correct.
letter we're all
It's the
discussing.
proprietor's way in, yep.
Mhm.
Just want to make that clear.
And then you also say number 4, provide 7 photos of boulders as located and move them away from the tubes. I think the boulders were pretty much appeared in maybe February of last year. They're according to pictures that were submitted to us.
Well, yeah, there were a few there, in in proximity, and they'll be. We talked about at least those. I think the proposal is to get those away from the fence.
We were under the impression the commission didn't like those
No,
boulders up
you-
against.
Right, right. I mean, I don't
The
know if you're
ropes.
just going to haphazardly move them back out to the harbor or where they came from. I mean,
The photos show there's a bunch more kind of distributed in the tidal zone there, and they can be
Mhm.
spread like those.
I have a question, I guess, about number 28 and the
The
construction.
condition, yep.
Yeah, the condition, I guess. The nourishment mix was 46% gravel, sand, and silt.
Correct. They're out of compliance with that at this point.
It was short on silt. So the condition is 40-40-20, and they did an analysis of the material out there, and it was
4653.
1,
Yeah.
something like that. So what did you put in there to supplement with the silty?
We didn't get into that as, at this point. That was what we thought
That
would be
spec will be
part of the discussion.
And
Yeah,
that was
that's
the
what we
original.
wanted to say. but-
Yeah.
Correct.
Were the original conditions placed in here in the packet?
I'll have a copy for
Or?
people want to use.
I'm sorry, I just asked Jeff for an original set of conditions, because this is part of an enforcement order, I just want to see what we asked you to do.
Yeah.
I can tell you, to speak to that directly, that specific condition, number 28 was that all nourishment provided shall be in accordance with the mix provided in the narrative by LEC Environmental dated 3/14/2014 with a 40% gravel, 40% sand, and 20% silt mixture.
I'm sorry, I meant to ask you for a copy of that before the meeting. That 60 cubic yards in number 6, that's just a one-time excess?
Right. If the original plan showed 3 smaller tubes above the 2 rows that exist there now, and the fill extended just to the top of those. The 60 yards in excess is what you saw out there as pretty much reaching the top. So that was a bit more nourishment than what was proposed.
More from an engineer's viewpoint, you don't feel like those 3 small core logs that we had asked originally wouldn't be better as far as maintaining vegetation? I mean, I
I
understand
do.
the as-built.
Sure.
You know, because that was what was
Well, let me-
proposed.
Right, and
This is, just to be clear, you can say
Yeah.
this is the initial
Exactly.
that
This-
you asked for in the
Yeah.
order.
Mhm. Yes.
So he still has time to install those 3 other things within the period of the order, and that's still on the
Well,
table.
that's some of my, to
Yes.
go back to the enforcement order, if we're asking to bring it into compliance with the original thing, then that's something that, it's not something that you think is a bad idea then?
Oh, right.
Okay.
And the owner thinks it's a good idea as well.
Right, right.
Although you're not suggesting that from an enforcement standpoint, he's obligated to build it that way, or did you think so?
Well, it depends on how we interpret bringing it back into compliance and where we reach that as a commission.
I mean, I think from the design, Stan and I have talked a little bit, but not, I don't know whether he thinks it's necessary to have it in there to make it a functional project, but if your interpretation is there's a requirement to build it with all of those elements in it as opposed to 2 larger ones only.
That's a good question maybe for Jeff.
It's kind of like, pardon me, so it's kind of like somebody getting an order of conditions and never doing the work.
Right, but doing half the
Right,
work.
it's not
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
But-
It's not complete.
It's not complete,
Well, but-
might
And you
never
get a
get
all they're-
certificate of compliance on that,
Right.
that was completed.
Right.
And that's when commission closes the,
No, but what I meant
No
was
matter
people
what.
can get an order of conditions to do something and not other permits and never do the work. So if someone decides they wanted to put, a driveway in and it was going to be 12 feet wide and they put a 10-foot wide drive and don't
Yeah, I
extend it,
understand.
I mean, that's,
But for a structure that's supposed to work
then
together,
we hang 'em.
one thing,
I can answer
Yeah, I'm
that.
curious
I can answer
whether they-
that.
it's necessary.
That question. I think pretty clearly is. I mean, obviously, if you're making a change from what the original approval was, it does require some sort of amendment or modification. But I think, and looking at the order and looking at, the discussion of the waiver and just kind of our experience as a commission with all of these other coastal engineering projects, they're designed to work as designed. I mean, you can't simply say, well, I put the tubes in, I don't want to put the nourishment in, and just say,
that would be out of,
I'm done, because it's
That's
not,
something that would
that's not how the
happen.
project's done. Or saying, I built my septic system, but I don't want to put my septic tank in, I just want the leach field. It doesn't work all those ways. If it's designed to work a specific way and represented, that's why we're in a situation of enforcement, because the project that was constructed and functioned through a season was not built in compliance with the order and was at such a stage where I would say in assessing the site that a portion of construction had been completed. I mean, nourishment sand had been brought in and covered over and created a template. An additional structure that wasn't permitted was constructed with part of what was there. So in looking at the structures, I think it's a complete structure or not. I mean, you can't just build the pieces of this that you want. It's not the same as I built my house and I decided not to build my pool. And I don't
So
want
it's
to do that
different
work.
than other
It's all functioning design together. Or I don't want to build the
That's what
returns
I'm
on my
saying.
structure.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. You
That's what
presented
I'm
this as an
saying.
engineered project, and it's not
I mean,
completed.
it's,
So,
well, right, I mean, at this point, again, this is the initial construction, it's the first year.
Okay.
He has X amount of dollars, X amount of time. He actually wanted to see the performance of the two rows and got a pretty good test this past winter.
with
Um,
the fence in front of it, sure.
Pardon me?
With the fence in front of it,
With the fence?
yeah,
Sure.
and the boulders.
Right, exactly. The main concern that we had was uprush and overtopping of these two rows. You'll note that we've got the 100-year flood elevation shown here at the top of the first row. He experienced all of the sand being removed from that bottom row. The second row, in some places, if you recall, was exposed, but for the most part, it was still covered. He's questioning whether he needs to go any higher to address that additional residual wave overtopping.
you raise an interesting question in terms of whether there's an obligation to put those in, or whether that's sort of,
I think there is, actually.
and taking that, we'll take that back, and review it from the standpoint of whether there would be a justification necessary, so some kind of an analysis that says, here's why this will function as desired without those three, or two of the three, or whatever. But so we'll take it as, without arguing with you over whether that is exactly how it should be applied to a project like this. We'll assume for now that it's part of the project to put those in, even though
He hasn't done it
indicated
yet.
whether he would want to not put them in.
Well, I'm just a little confused, because normally we try to reduce the amount of structural material that goes in there, and now we're trying to increase the amount of.
Well, in this case, though, I would remove the fence and the boulders. I mean, I would just build it in compliance with the order as given. And I can't believe a contractor actually did this way and just kind of decided, here's the order I have on how to build it, but I'm going to build it a totally different way.
Well, no,
There's like
no.
chop off of 2x4s. and-
There's a clarification
Yeah.
that's important here. The contractor did not build it with the fence. Mr. Thompson
Added that
conceded that
fence.
he himself added that fence
Right.
in misreading of the previous plan. I can go back to the hearing and
No, I
I
remember
recall,
him saying
you
that
came
on
in with
site.
two plans,
Right.
and when we got the the nod from the commission that they thought it would be better without the fence, that was what we finally gave.
Right, right.
He misinterpreted. as
So
being able
removal
to
of
do
the
it.
fence really is, I think, necessity.
Well,
But that's just,
Fence come out, so I would think they would want the other tubes.
yeah, I would think that the
well,
design
here's,
is proposed is the way.
if you want to have, if now's the time to discuss the fence, the rationale for the fence in front of, at a minimum, the pre-78 house on the lot, is that it provides additional protection to those tubes, and we think is consistent with the performance standards for a pre-78 lot, as preventing debris from, and the idea behind this is to prevent the debris from hitting those tubes, large waterborne debris, and so it creates stability to it. We were asking for it, he's asked for it in the course of an amended order because he could submit a new notice of intent. We'd be
Which
right
he
here
should,
anyway.
he's been denied, I think, once or twice on a fence before. This is not,
Has that been proposed and denied? I wasn't involved, I want
That-
to be clear on that.
I don't think so.
Was there a
I think we
specific NOI of the
discussed
fence?
different fences, different types of
yeah.
fences.
isn't-
That was
There has been a
needed.
project that was issued a denial.
A denial. So this is coming
So there
back
was
in-
no,
through an enforcement.
So let me
act.
understand that, I don't have that detail. So there was a notice of intent
Yeah,
previously, I know there was something for a revetment.
the denial was for the revet.
Right.
Yeah.
This one came in with the fence, and then the redesign of the project was to include the tubes and fill combination only through the hearing
And I
process.
think that the fence that was proposed was the zigzag sand drift fence. It wasn't the linear fence.
Yeah, always, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a linear fence, we haven't approved one in quite some time.
Right.
For engineering reasons, for the ability to hold sand, for the fact that that makes it more like a bulkhead, there's a lot of reasons why. But we didn't approve a fence at all, so, I mean, to me, this is kind of like if someone says, well, I want to build this kind of house, and it's going to be 50 feet from the wetland, and you say, okay, here's your permit, and then they come back and they built it 25 feet from the wetland, then we would go back to them and say, I'm sorry, you couldn't build.
Yeah,
Some of the coastal engineering projects that we're doing, I mean, not being designed the way it's proposed is actually failure criteria in a lot of cases. So I just don't know how that fits into this. But it's
Well,
not.
it's just an enforcement issue, it's easy enough to fix.
So we permitted no fence.
No fence
in the
at all.
project. Otherwise, that
No
stands
boulders,
with the
no-
tubes. Yeah, no fence.
and
The two tubes were tied down, so they did have stakes, well, and that's why it's important to look at the original order as proposed. The reason it's back here is for an enforcement order, is because it's built differently than proposed.
And these are sand-filled tubes, or are they solid tubes?
Sandfield.
Sand-filled.
And you added extra nourishment, right, on top of what was proposed in the project?
That's right.
Just because
That-
there are so many marshy areas there.
There's a salt
Burying
marsh
that
right in front.
habitat is a pretty important factor in this.
So we spent, like, I don't know how many hearings, but a lot of hearings discussing the proper design for this.
Yeah, we're doing that again, Mr. Chairman. Again, I would say that if we could just hear from everybody here and understand what's here and get through, because we've got other people we're going to hear from, then we can discuss. We can get it summarized by
We
ourselves
typically
and
hear from
discuss
the
it.
commission first, and then we go to
It's
butters.
just not
and
quite
public
time to be
comment.
deliberating and arguing.
You know, I appreciate that, Mr. Black, but I am interested in having a discussion now about, before this
By all
comment.
means, we should be doing it. We should
No,
be
no, I
doing
mean
it
about
according to the
fence.
protocols.
And I happen to think, and I wasn't involved with the prior application when the fence was discussed, but a zigzag drift fence at a lower profile, and I think with the site visitor, you're familiar with it, but the West End Geary property, where there's a zigzag lower profile fence, even that, matching that design, is something we would want to present to you here now as part of an amendment, to include that for the purpose of, matching the design and providing that kind of protection at the toe.
Well, part of the
Without
complication.
interfering with flow of sand and the other concern you have about it being sort of a linear structure.
Just to be clear, to clarify on that, the original proposal from the plan set from January of 2014 was for a linear sand drift fence along the front of the 5-2 accommodation.
But we did not
That was then amended through the hearing process to the final design.
Okay, so he
The
built.
proposal was linear,
Yeah.
Correct.
which is what I think, what confused him when he went out there and built this, so. Yeah, you know, subject to the further discussion, and I don't think anyone other than us is here to speak in favor of the linear fence. I'd be surprised if they are. But as the discussion goes forward, we're prepared to talk about modifying this at the amended order request to a zigzag drift fence at the lower profile. And just my last comment, and I think we take public comment here, is unlike the other instance where, you know, somebody does work like cutting branches or cutting trees without permission and then saying, hey, you know, is it okay if I leave that and then cut this tree too? This has had, the fence issue has not had any adverse effect from the analysis that's been done on any part of the resource areas. And so it's not as if somebody went ahead, did some work without permission that has had an adverse effect or changed the conditions on the ground, and it can't be undone in the context of asking for an amendment to the order. Slightly different
We'll see if
circumstance. Yeah,
the
no,
neighbors
just I want
agree.
to
Yeah.
suggest that
Yeah.
as you deliberate.
I'm not
Yep.
sure how much information has been presented to show no adverse effect.
So any other questions for us before we hear from other folks or about what's
Let's go to
submitted?
understand, if you don't mind.
No,
We'll hear from
good.
the neighbors.
Yep.
Hi, Sarah Alger. I represent the neighbor, 78 Whirlwind Road LLC, which is the directly affected neighbor. With me is the principal of that LLC, Amanda Cross. Also, Arcus Burrow, who's our consultant, and Dan Bailey, who's with me from Rackham Investment. I feel a little bit like I've gone through the looking glass. At the last hearing, when we discussed this project, I think I asked pretty strongly that I felt you guys should revoke this order, or at least make them go in accordance with it. And to hear this argument that somehow they're just in the process of constructing it, when they not only constructed what was approved, they went well beyond that. The boulders, the fence, the bad nourishment. I would argue there has been detrimental impact to my client's property. I think that's what your first order found. And I'm still back where I was, but I want to turn this over to Dan, who has a lot more to say about it than I do. And
I think Sarah has said it in a nutshell, and I'll elaborate a little bit, try not to take up too much of your time. Again, I'm representing Amanda and her LLC. They asked me to come down today because this is an enforcement order that's been open for 4 months. Your enforcement order says restore the conditions that were authorized in the order. Here we are 4 months later, nothing has happened. Amanda's property was affected. The enforcement order says specifically that this unpermitted structure is causing adverse impacts on abutting properties. I was down there today. You can see the end scour. You can see the beach stairs at the end of the proprietor's way are very unstable. I walked down myself. As Sarah said, you know, you have abundant authority. You have a lot of different things that you could do. You could impose a fine of $300 a day. You can direct under your own bylaw. You can direct town council to go to court to compel this to be restored. You could require a bond. Most importantly, and you know, Jeff, Sarah, and Ernie will remember this because we went about 9 rounds on it on the Pippin's Way subdivision. You reopened that hearing. There was a hearing where no work had ever been done. You reopened it because of questions regarding the height of the groundwater. And you know, entertained, after getting an opinion from town council, that you could indeed revoke an order. I mean, this is a poster child for when you might revoke an order. Somebody went out and did specifically what they had asked to do. You told them they couldn't do it, and he did it anyway. Okay? And we can talk about the wrong sets of plans, but come on. The contractor didn't do it. The property owner did it. It's a little mysterious to me. So we're here today, and Amanda will give you her perspective, but we're here today to ask for action. We feel that before you entertain any consideration of an amendment, some of which, you know, there are a couple of things here that sound, you know, some of the nourishment sounds like it's going to address some concerns that we have. But before you do anything, it should be in compliance. And our request is that you give them a short amount of time to get into compliance. If it's not in compliance by then, you start fining them. And if the fine doesn't work, then you direct town council to go to court and you get this fixed. Thank you. Amanda.
I'm not good at speaking in public, so I have notes. I am, said, the owner of this property. I've only owned it for about...
Just say your name.
Oh, sorry, Amanda Cross.
Thank you.
Owner of 78 Winnet Road. I've only owned it for about 2 years. But it's been in my family for 35 years. I have been coming to this island as a resident for 50 years, some part-time, some full-time. And I also, as mentioned, share that same eroding bank. It's eroding on my side as well. I love this island. I love the people. I love the history. I love the environment. I'm planning to move back here full-time, probably in the next couple of years. I'm glad the state in Florida, where there are not such strong regulations. A lot of the state and the town have very strong regulations in terms of protecting the environment. And I also know that I've seen both here and in Florida, there are things you can do to slow down erosion on coastal banks, but sometimes they can have adverse effects to the neighbors and to the environment, not just physical neighbors, but the environment. I did not come to any of your other meetings about this. I had a lot of family issues, and I did not come to the last meeting, which I wanted to come to, but I had to be at the closing of my mom's estate, not estate, selling of her house off island. And I'm talking about the harm to the environment. Right after the big storm in January, I had a friend FaceTime me literally 2 days after and showed me in real time, and then he created videos and pictures for me of what happened. And the structure that Mr. Thompson built remained intact. I mean, the unpermitted fence is there whole. The tubes are there whole. They were not deflated. No sand came out of them. They are whole the way they are whole now. It acted as if they were hard armored. And that's my term. The original proposal of the riprap, I think of as hard armoring, something that's not supposed to move, whereas this is supposed to flex in some way and absorb the energy. But the ends, right at the end, between where the tubes ended and then the steps down Fargo Way, there's a 25-foot, I don't know the exact width of Fargo Way. The steps in the middle.
Right there,
Right there. Yes. There was literally a 90-degree angle from the end of the fence and the end of the tube and went right into the cliff, dug into the cliff, came behind the steps. The steps were, the person who was talking to me said they were incredibly unstable. They're still, they're funky steps like a lot of steps are, but they were seriously disturbed steps. There was part of the bank there was coming over that hadn't been. There was also water that was running off the top of the bank that used to run under the bank and is now running over the bank. And I mean, it was just major, from when I had left in September to, I mean, it was just very different, very dramatic, very devastating to see this. I know that then, I mean, and I've been following what you've been doing. You have been following your regulations. You've been following what makes sense in a balance between a person's personal rights on their property and protecting the overall rights of the town, of the property, of the environment. As I said, you didn't approve the hard arming. You did approve the soft arming, which seemed reasonable to me. I did not see any fence on the thing that you approved. I noticed the fence just before I left when they were constructing it, and I was like, what's this fence? And I didn't get what the fence was. And you, right after, when they were building it, you were proposing to have an enforcement order earlier when they were building it. When there was notice that they put the fence in. You didn't issue it, but I could see in your minutes that you were talking about an enforcement order. Then came the January storm. Then at the next meeting is when you actually issued the enforcement order, and it said about adverse effects. You then, I saw in the April meeting, you approved a motion to authorize your staff to start the removal process for the fence. These are all things that make sense to me. What I don't understand what happened next, because I assume that if I were on the other side of this, that I would say, okay, what can I do? How can I work with it? Instead, when this was what floored me before that May meeting, is to come back and say, I got a new plan. My new plan is what I built, not what you asked for. It's to keep the fence, and that one actually said, add 10 more feet of the tube, which you've now said you don't want to do. 10 more feet of the tubing would put it into Fargo Way, and then take, again, the end scouring, and move it, the bulk of it, right up against Fargo. I mean, the end scouring continued on. I mean, I have the whole, I don't know how many feet, but a long distance of my property, and I don't attribute it all to it. But the fact that it was just literally night and day, and you can look at the map, you can look at Google Maps, and it's a solid structure, and then it's just, I mean, it's zigzag. I mean, it's just, I don't understand. And what I don't understand is it seems to me that it's like rewarding a kid for doing something wrong. You're letting them do what they, you're saying, I'm giving you approval for what we specifically told you not to do. And that part I didn't understand. Thank you.
Art, do you have something?
Gaspar for Amanda Cross. One of my questions had to do with the plantings. And the plantings have always been an integral part of any of the stabilization projects. And I understand that the order is active. It may be considered an ongoing project, but the plantings haven't been done, and I noticed a difference between the approved plan and the amended order. The amended order doesn't show any plantings. So I just put out there that, we would think, if you're not, the compliance portion of it, and perhaps there should be some timing associated with, getting the bank planted. And the other piece, just to back up what Amanda said, of course, is that the tubes didn't contribute any sediment at all under pretty harsh conditions.
Can I just add one other point on Sarah Alger or Amanda Cross for the timing? I think they've been down moving the boulders around, and if you do an amended order, I think you should have some seasonal restrictions on work that can be done down there, because there are a lot of birds down there. I think they have machinery down there. I didn't see it, but the boulders have moved around, and I don't think they picked them up by hand. And I don't think you should have machinery down there now during this particular part of the season. And then the only other thing I would say is this lateral fence. I can't ever remember when you have approved a lateral fence with no separation. You always do the zigzag with 50% open space. This doesn't even come close to that. It's just, it acted more like a bulkhead. And you specifically found, as part of your findings in that order of conditions that you issued, that this wasn't a coastal engineering structure. And we had argued that that was not correct at the time. It was a gray area before the fence went in. I think with the fence, it clearly is. And that's what you've been doing in other situations. And if you're going to issue an amended order that has a fence component, then you need to be looking at the waiver requirements, which the last time around you found the project couldn't meet because there's room for retreat and you only have 378 structure. I don't want to go back into all of that, but I mean, I think if you're going in that direction, that's a conversation we're going to have to reopen and revisit.
one other point, just stick things, I only want to raise points that haven't already been raised, but with respect to compliance with the order, we still have, it's not just these things, they didn't establish the escrow account, which was clearly said prior to the start of construction. I know that the new letter says they're in the process. Well, what's going on? I mean, how long does that take? And again, something else that wasn't been done. It's sort of like they're treating the order like a menu, doing what they want, picking and choosing. It just doesn't seem right. It undermines everything that we're here to do, that you're here to do, excuse me, and if people, if they don't have to comply. So that's just another one. With respect to quarterly photos, it says that they were taken but just submitted on June 2nd, but I didn't find them in the file either. I don't know if they're...
I didn't see that.
So that's in the letter that says number 22. But again, they weren't submitted in a timely manner. And then the surveying, again, just happening now. It's sort of like everything was blown off until this happened. And is there any consequence at all for that?
There was no report at the time of the storm either, right, which was required?
Okay.
I'll say that is correct.
Number 22, 24 hours.
Option of just enforcing our prior order.
So
What are our options here?
we have a number of options. You continue through the amendment process. You can certainly order, in accordance with the enforcement order it into compliance and set a very time-specific date. I would also say, to go to the far end, you could also issue out a fine for the time period. You can also, you do have within your rights, Mr. Bailey was correct, and he's probably the most expert on this subject, but you do also have the ability to revoke a permit specifically for the failure to comply with conditions of a permit. So that's under our bylaw, that's under Chapter 136. So those are all options that are there. I guess I would just say, whatever decision or action you guys take, please do keep in mind that the orders of conditions that we issue are our document that we use. So the action that you guys take obviously just doesn't impact one, it impacts others. So
It's even more important.
Say again?
is the actions that you guys take as far as enforcing the terms and conditions of your orders of conditions are important in the sense of that's our issuing document that we send out for instructions to comply with our permits. So all we have is the ability to make people comply to our permits and our penalties.
I think we really should do that. I mean, I would argue that revoking permits too much, but I think just asking them to go back to comply. We don't need to hear any amendment. They can always come, any applicant can always come with a new plan to us at any time. But I think we should ask them to comply with the order as written.
I expect we're all going to see this the same way, Mr. Chairman. I would just say the same thing I've been saying. We follow our route here. The applicant might want to respond a little bit, and then we can wrap this up probably in fairly short order.
There's other comments?
Emily?
Sir, yeah, Ms. McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emily McKinnon for the Nantucket Land Council. I think most of the comments I had have been said, but there are just a few last points that I wanted to make. I actually first submitted some photos of this area after I noticed the boulders out there last July to the commission office. And then I think I followed up by showing them to the commission sometime last summer or fall. So, and these are already in the file, these photos. But I was reviewing the most recent letter, and again, along with compliance, as Mr. Gasparo just said, I think it would be really important for each of you, and maybe you've already done this, but to review all of the special conditions that were in the order. I don't know if you have done so recently or if it was part of this week's packet or not, but I think as you're reviewing it and deciding how to proceed, you should read all of those as they were written so that you have a good sense of what has been complied with and what has not, because as Mr. Gasparo said, a lot of the reporting and some of the other conditions have not been complied with. And then at the last hearing, when there was discussion about a site visit, someone had talked about looking more closely at the rolls, and I know that it's been brought up already, but someone made a comment about actually cutting one open just to double check that that was constructed properly, since other aspects of the project were not. And I'm not sure if that was done or not, but if you are going to issue an amended order to ask the applicant to come back into compliance, that maybe while they're out and exposed, you might want to do that and just ensure that the aspects of the project that are on the ground were constructed in compliance. And then I think, again, I would just encourage the commission to review the order of conditions and maybe also just consider or ask for some more information on what it will require to bring it back into compliance. What work physically will have to take place on the ground, just so that you know what work will be taking place out there rather than just ordering it to come back into compliance. What exactly will that entail? Thank you.
Barry?
Yeah, a couple of comments. First of all, I think my brother misspoke when he talked about what the enforcement order said. The enforcement order said, come to the next hearing of the commission to discuss what corrective action is to be taken. It didn't say, do this. The second thing is that, we don't need discussion of poster child and, whatever else Mr. Bailey may have had for a different case. But what we have is a client who does not live here year-round, who has been implementing the project. We can get from Netco, who put the rolls together, some certification of that they were constructed in accordance with. We need to cut them open to deal with that. And so Mr. Thompson responded to the enforcement order, had his consultant put together responsive information. We had the site visit. We've updated you on all the things being done to fulfill the conditions of the order, which is what was the date of issuance?
The order of conditions.
About a year ago?
The date of issuance was the 2nd of April of last year.
Yeah, okay, so 1 year of a 3-year order. And so, I don't think it's necessary for you to be punitive with this guy. I mean, I've gotten to know him. I've made him aware of what's going on in terms of, understandably, the frustration you might be feeling and the neighbor might be feeling. I'm not so sure the photographs that were submitted actually are proof of adverse impact to the neighboring property. There's the wetland actually has the wetland outlet that comes into that area that those photos show, and so there is erosion naturally from that slumping as water comes from the wetland, fresh water off of the top of the bank. So I'm not so sure that there isn't just erosion on the unprotected areas of the bank. As trees fall, they pull off parts of the bank. We're here again to, I will remind him of things. He got a price on removal of the system, and he's going to place that in escrow. You're more than willing to set deadlines, soon for specific things like that. And we would respectfully request your favorable action on the amended order to allow a zigzag fence, which has been your approved, prior approved design for projects like this, and certainly take out the vertical fence. Recognizing that was neither approved nor something you would approve.
So the 3 options we have are from most strenuous to revoking the whole order, or just asking to come into compliance and giving him a date to come into compliance, and then whether we feel like we should fine him or not. I think it's fair to just say he's already got the price for removing at least the fence. 2 parts of it are built. It's easy enough to add the 3 core logs on top, revegetate it. We probably need to decide if we
We need to know if that's his intent, is to continue. You're saying he might not want to put the other bags in.
Well,
I think we're going to have to tell him.
Do we know where we are?
Yeah, no, I have to tell you that in my discussion with him, I did tell him my understanding of the Wetlands Protection Act and bylaws is that, you get approval for a project, but if you were looking at it as we discussed here today, that you wanted that to be part of the approved project, then he will install it. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to correct is Mr. Gasparo said these plans for an amended order don't show the vegetation. These are as-built. they don't show vegetation because there's no vegetation out there yet. So if he was determining what to do on that upper part, if he didn't put in the 3 upper rolls, he would vegetate. If he placed them in, he'll vegetate after. But this was not intended to show, intent not to vegetate up there, it was to show the
So,
as-built.
Mr. Chairman, do we have clarity on whether the applicant is asking to close this hearing at this time, or whether what they're
That's a
looking to do?
good question. I think they're waiting for guidance from us.
Mr. Chairman, can I mention one item that we didn't discuss?
Yes.
Which is, there was the unpermitted outfall pipe that was pumping water from the, I believe, the crawl space or basement. You go ahead.
That's inaccurate. There's no water being pumped from anywhere.
Mr. Chairman, can I have one at a time?
Yeah, just wanted to make that clear.
No, go ahead. You have the
I
floor.
mean, across again. After we bought this property, we noticed this pipe going across the road. I didn't know if it was doing anything, it was active, whatever. I went out one point in a rainstorm for some reason to the property last summer when it was here. And there was like gushing water going across. And it literally, if you follow the wetlands, it ended right in the beginning of the wetlands. And that part is the part that, if you go downhill from there, is the part where it goes up and over that, now over that cliff, but it used to go underneath. But that was, and then I understand then afterwards you cut off the pipe. But that was done much later. But that pipe, I mean, that's to me something else that's like, I don't understand why you can take water from one property and put it over into
Well,
the
that's part of this.
We would, as part of the enforcement, is to remove that pipe.
Yeah, and that's been proposed.
But it's just, I don't know.
If I may, just to be clear, there's no basements being sump pumped. It's from when the second house was built, they put the foundation up too high and raised the whole elevation, the architect and the builder apparently. So some water collects in the driveway area, and there's some catch basins that direct to this area. And so it's not a basement, it's not groundwater being pumped.
It's not, but on your plans, it wasn't on your previous plans, it's
Yeah.
now on the plan.
Yeah.
It's right next to the
Sure.
catch basin's right
That's
next
all-
to the wetland.
yeah, just so you know, that's been proposed to be
Right.
taken out, and it's not basement sump water.
Okay. But it just, to me, it was like, why can't somebody take their water and put it
They're
out?
addressing
They
that.
can't,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
But
good.
but it's talking about the
Mr.
water,
Thompson
but you
completely
were
understands.
talking as if, that, yes, I have, what are they called, upland wetlands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have water that going off, but part of that contributing water going off was the other water I would not normally have had if that pipe wasn't there. That's all I'm
That's why
saying.
that's being corrected.
Anybody else ready to close this hearing?
Oh, it's Mark, do you have one more thing?
Well, I was just wondering with respect to the surface drainage, now, was that ever permitted, or was that more unpermitted work?
But we've asked for it to be removed.
No, but even originally, when he put it in after building the house, so now you have now you still, if you're leaving the catch basin that's there, it's still gonna serve as an overflow within 25 feet of a wetland that wouldn't be typically permitted, so it seems like it's another feature that's being left that was never permitted in an area that you wouldn't allow something, so why don't they do
Right.
proper drainage
Yes.
and permit it? Instead, it's like
Sounds
more
like
work.
a
We
Yeah.
discussed this at the site visit, you said you thought it was legitimate to have that there.
I said it would be a permit. I mean, something that you would have to permit.
This is an amended order
Well,
request.
You can't, I don't.
where though?
Yeah, that-
Again, I
Where
didn't have
it
a
is.
plan there. I mean, well, anyway, I would think
You
that
saw it.
you would, I didn't have the plan, but I would think that you would, want that to be at least 25 feet from a wetland,
Mhm.
typically.
Well, we were gonna have them remove it outside of the 50, all the way back to the catch basin. I don't know if the catch basin's within 25 feet.
Sure, it's within,
Yeah, that one's.
whatever that distance is.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible to see how the commission feels on this? Think about whether we want to hear the amended order or just
Yeah, we do.
want to get back to enforcing this?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just have a sense of that.
I definitely think we should just say you gotta come back into compliance with what we permitted. And if that includes the catch basin being completely removed, I don't have the other order in front of me, but it sounds like we now have 2 enforcement orders. But certainly for the one in front of us, the enforcement was to bring it back into compliance. We spent a lot of time and effort and thought into that, so.
There wasn't anything
Back.
called out about the catch basin and the secondary catch basin, because of the way that I saw it, there's a catch basin up at the garage because it was built too low. That dumps into a secondary catch basin
Which should
near
be-
that pipe outflow. It seems like they could have easily gone the other way.
Well, it goes up, terrain goes up.
Oh, it
Or
goes-
doing
goes
a
straight
rain
up.
garden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Along
Keep
those
fixing
lines.
the
So-
sign.
Right.
Either way, that was never, that's not even on the table right
Yeah, no, we were never permitted
now.
that.
There's an efficient way to do this, which is you have.
If we're getting the commission's opinion, can we
Yeah.
just stick to that, please,
Yeah.
Mr.
Mike, what do
Chairman,
you
and
think?
and kind of keep this orderly? What do I think?
Yeah,
So
about
we're
it.
coming off, sometimes it's subtle, you know? I think what we should do is close this hearing, deny this amended order, and have the staff in the interim, when the denial is getting written or whatever has to be done, prepare some kind of a memo of compliance that we can all agree on at the next regular meeting, saying that the property owner needs to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I think we've discussed this
To
thing
bring the
around in
property
circles plenty of
sort of-
times here. And I'm not for being punitive, but I am all for saying and putting it on record that we will give you a short, reasonable window of time to get these things done, to be in compliance, and then absolutely the meter kicks on and let all the lawyers duke it out. I don't see that we're going to get, that we need to spend any more time parsing through these things here. Enough smoke and mirrors for me.
That sounds reasonable. It's only fair.
I'm happy to make the motion again to close the hearing.
I think we have to have the applicant.
We're kind of asked to close.
I mean, if you guys feel you have the information that you need to make a decision. you
Yeah, we're
certainly
dumping it all back on you.
So, everything's normal. And that's the thing, is if you guys feel you have all the information that you need to make a decision. This is an amended
order. We don't
An amended
have to-
order is a little bit different. It's not like a notice of intent where you have a request to amend a permit. You can simply say, we don't wish to hear the, we further request, and we're not going to continue to issue the amendment out to change the original permit.
So then we don't need to issue anything further.
Correct.
So we don't have to issue a denial, we just say we choose
The
not.
first
to.
Because the original order is still an
The
active
first thing we
order.
do is close the hearing, is that?
You would close the public hearing, yes, and then you would
Do
decide
you think we need
to
anything
not
else on the
issue.
record in order to close the hearing?
If you guys are looking for more information, then the applicant wants to provide more information.
I would like to be heard on one, just to respond to that. It's within your discretion whether you want to take action to an amended order or not.
Mhm.
We recognize that.
Right.
If you're going in the direction of not, and you're going in the direction of something that says, come up to snuff on the order that was issued, which is still open, he'll do that.
Yeah.
That's what
I just want to make it clear that,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I want you to know that he thinks, and I would think, that it's without prejudice to him filing a new notice of intent for
Anyone.
a
Yes,
zigzag
sure.
fence or whatever.
Yeah, but he has to become
but
compliant
Go
with the
back to
first
square
order.
one and then come forward.
Yeah.
I think it's efficient to do it through this process, but they're both,
Let's clear the
They're both
air. Let's
parallel.
get it there. Let's
Yeah.
get, we'll
That's
show
fine.
good faith.
Yep.
Okay, so your move to close, Mike?
Yeah, again and again and again.
He seconded his
I will
own motion.
second it for you.
Okay. All
Wait,
in
according to
favor?
Mike,
Aye.
we don't need a second.
I know, we
All in
don't, but
favor
I
of
knew he
closing
didn't.
this?
Aye.
Yes, aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously.
And I think we should go, what Mike said, and have, instruct staff to draft an order of enforcement that puts them into compliance with the original.
Anyone want
Order.
to set kind of a basal timetable to make that happen?
Well,
You want
that's
it-
interesting.
No more than 30 days? Is it?
30
I
days.
think
Need a little time to mobilize.
Well, wait, my question would be, if they have a permit,
No, I would say we do.
I would say
They're out of
they need
compliance.
to remove the non-compliant materials.
Well, I
Within
think we
30
should
days.
send you a letter.
To make sure they can get stuff on.
Well, I think, just if I may real quickly, we can set up similar to what we did, not to keep comparing it to another one, but similar to how we set up the Hummock Pond wetland, where we essentially put together the punch list.
It needs to be
And-
faster than that, though, that Hummock Pond.
Well, no, I know that one went very slow,
Yeah.
but
That's not the greatest example.
no,
It went along
no,
well when we
it-
finally figured it out.
is when we finally figured it out, is when we set measurable goals to be met with timetables that were very clear, that you have to have number one done by, I don't know what the bad date is, but
Fence
you have to have
out
number
by-
one done by July 15th.
Yeah.
And then number two is there, but they have to come in during the interim or someone's here, or providing information to the commission to update them and providing essentially self-monitoring to make sure that we're still meeting those timetables. And then we can put together whatever result of this letter, but.
Do we still have an enforcement order open on this?
Oh,
Yes, yeah.
Okay, then.
That's, we're going
That's
back
kind of
to
what
the
the start of all
enforcement.
of this was.
Which is what I was going to say, is let us give you a proposed schedule.
No, I think we should be giving you a proposal.
Well,
Let's work together.
Well, if you'd like to submit one to me, I'd be happy to read it.
Yeah, why don't you
Let these
submit
guys
one,
talk,
and
is my
then we can look at it and review it.
no
yeah.
reason, because otherwise we'd have to say like that one, and change that. Let Stan and Jeff talk
Yeah,
about
let's
it.
take it off of Jeff's plate and put it on Stan's plate.
Let them talk.
Stan makes
Stan and I will work.
big money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That'd be
so.
fine with them.
You can tell by his suit.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good job. Thanks, Mike. Okay. The other one is,
Beating a dead horse or whatever.
yeah, Monomoy Creek Realty Trust at 12 Monomoy Creek Road.
Congratulations, guys.
They're very sensitive, you know.
Sorry
Good
for
evening.
being there.
Brian Madden from LEC Environmental. With Don Bracken, representing the applicant.
Oh, the applicant's walking out the door?
Sarah's the trustee.
Oh, okay.
The amendment request before you is related to an order of conditions that was issued May 2014 for relocation of existing structure and some additions, proposed pool and a cabana, as well as lawn landscaping and some mowed areas that were historically granted based on some aerial images. The amendment before you is a new house footprint. I've highlighted the existing footprint in purple here, and then the outline of new structures in pink. As previously mentioned, the resource areas surrounding the property, they're basically all the way around, are bordering vegetated wetland that transitions to salt marsh in the harbor. Coastal bank, I'm sorry I didn't highlight the coastal bank here in blue. It's on that. But basically it falls here and then stops, picks back up here and falls around there. It's a coastal bank by definition. It's an upgrading of the floodplain elevation at elevation 8. The proposed work has been largely, the proposed house footprint has been largely concentrated over the existing house, but shifting further away from the northerly bordering vegetated wetlands in the coastal bank here, basically trying to split the difference because you have the resource areas and buffers on both sides. We're trying to maximize setbacks, minimize proposed new structure in the 50-foot buffer zone, and there's a net reduction of 671 square feet of proposed structure in the 50-foot. There's only a small portion of the proposed house footprint that minimally nips the 25-foot buffer zone to the coastal bank, which overlaps with the existing house, basically in this little corner right here, right there. It's about 24 square feet. And we discussed that at the onsite as well. The applicant is proposing to relocate the pool and cabana. The cabana's name has been switched to a boathouse out here outside the 50-foot buffer zone. There's proposed 117 square foot shed as well. The lawn edge has been further consolidated as previously proposed. Irrigation is proposed within the lawn, and any fertilizer will comply with the BMPs for the island. And there's a proposed retaining wall currently proposed as the driveway enters the site. Again, this all kind of dovetails with the restoration of the existing driveway work that's on number 10, Monomoy, the abutting property, but there is some regrading that minimally does extend onto this current subject parcel, just to tie in those 3-to-1 side slopes. And similarly, erosion control blank will be utilized, warm season grass mix, and the proposed shrubs, arrowwood, bayberry, and hibiscus blueberry will be planted along that slope. The applicant is also proposing to revegetate some existing lawn areas here and here. These 2 orange areas that are on the locus. It's existing manicured lawn that they're proposing to plant switchgrass. And there is an area right here that they're going to supplement. That was the area that was vegetated by dogbane, that they're proposing to add some of the switchgrass as well. Due to high groundwater, the proposed structure will consist of a waterproof monoslab due to the high groundwater within 2 feet. And I think the final element of the project that's slightly different than the previously approved version is there was the limit of work was a little bit closer to the wetlands, and it's not shown on this plan, but up in the northern reach, the limit of work was about 15 feet off of this wetland boundary, and basically followed the existing edge of clearing you saw out there that had been mowed to some extent. That has all been pulled in to further consolidate and allow that area to naturally regrow. And the proposed increased square footage is about 3,830 square feet of that area will be left to naturally revegetate. And I think that basically summarizes the amendment request. And sorry, and just to state, we did request the waiver under the provisions as initially issued, and reduction of the structural square feet within the 50-foot, the increased setbacks, as well as the replanted lawn areas and the consolidated limit of work is for no adverse effect on long-term net benefit. So, sorry.
And Mr. Perry, you have comments?
I haven't, this is all I've heard about this, but I would say from a waiver standpoint, they're going with a long-term net benefit. Is that what you're requesting? You have to justify,
Is that what we just said? We heard no adverse?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Both. Okay. Well, by definition, by moving that house 27 feet to the wetland has an adverse impact, and so they need to mitigate that. And so the commission gets to decide whether the increase in or decrease in lawn offsets the fact that the building is within 27 feet. The other half of that no adverse impact is that there's also no alternatives, and clearly there's an alternative to redesign this house that meets the commission's regulations. It's a large lot with plenty of upland space, and so it's hard to say that half of the waiver request of no adverse impact and no alternative can be met. The net benefit is more of a discretionary decision by the commission as to whether what they're proposing offsets what the closeness of the new building. I mean, especially where they're tearing down the existing building and putting up a brand new one, it's really hard to figure why they can't comply with the regulations.
Well, just to kind of refresh the commission's memory on the initial order that was issued was the waiver request under A and C that was issued was proposed structure. The structure as proposed, given the existing site conditions, will not have an adverse impact on the resource area. The Commission also finds that there are no reasonable alternatives that allow the project to go forward. The Commission also finds that the increased separation of the structure from the resource areas and the reestablishment of the buffer zone area will provide a long-term net benefit to the resource area and its buffer zone. So we've significantly expanded that reestablishment of the buffer zone to naturally revegetate. We are increasing the setbacks to the closest resource areas. Under existing conditions, it's about 10 feet to the state-defined coastal bank in this location. We are 27 feet on the south end for the proposed structure, but we are 50 feet from the vegetated wetland boundary in this location. That's 50 feet from this point to that point. It is a large lot, but there's not a large area outside the 50-foot buffer zone. We're, again, splitting the difference, and we feel that the proposal before you is in line with the waiver that was previously issued.
I have a question. What exactly was approved the last time? Was the pools and things were, like, what's the square footage change, I guess, between what was approved and this amendment?
I don't have the exact numbers. I think the cabana is somewhere over here, and I think the pool is here. Those are outside the 50-foot buffer zone. I think the footprint of the house is largely right here.
So the purple
Just as
is
far as mitigated
current.
area.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess we don't, so we don't have what was previously approved on this.
No, it's a lot.
Jeff,
I'm sure we have it available somewhere. Here it comes.
And yeah, and just to reiterate, there is a 671 square foot reduction in new structure in the 50 foot.
But it looks like there was nothing in the 25 before.
There's
That's, I'm just trying to understand that number.
yeah, there's 700 square feet existing within the 25 foot. Currently, there's only 24 foot proposed right now, footprint overlapping with the existing house.
Right, but I mean, you're amending this one, right?
Correct.
So what is the increase or decrease in the 25 from this ordinance?
From that, I don't have that specific number.
You don't understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, how much? Let's see, proposed square feet.
Because you reduced a lot before in your original order, bringing it away from the setbacks all the way around.
Yeah.
And you can see where it was already approved, there's not a dimension there, but, I mean, there's the 25-foot buffer, maybe that's 28 feet, something like that, so we're pretty close to what was already approved.
right, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's about, oops, sorry.
The problem is on this one, it's close on both sides now. It's been on one side. This one it was, or it might not be. I'm just
No, I
It's
think,
about
No.
28 feet on this side, so 28 versus 27.
and as far as, redesigning the house, I mean, we had this as a basis to give to the architect, and we try to set the guidelines based on this. That's how we came up with this, which we don't think is much different than,
What is the distance to?
It's about 31.
So 31 to 27.
Well, on the south side it's 28 to 27, and then let's see, the closest point here is about like 28. So it's about the same on the north side and a foot difference.
So about
on the south.
3 foot one side.
The structure itself, the proposed structure is slightly larger, but it's the bulk of the expansion is outside the 50-foot buffer zone right here. And okay, so here's you guys don't have to see this. Here's the proposed silt fence line. So it's 15 feet off of the coastal bank here. I think this is about 15 feet, and 15 feet over here as well. This is where we're proposing to move this all up to the 25 foot to have it intact, actually vegetated 25 foot. So it's this area coming around, and then this area, as well as over here. It's 15 feet to the vegetated wetland. We're bringing that up to the 25 foot. In its entirety, that's 3,800 square feet.
Any other questions or concerns? Anything from the public?
I'm certainly going to Bruce's point on if we issue a positive order, we don't have to do it for both waivers. If we think that only no adverse impact, no alternatives works,
after we've heard from everybody that there is, and we're ready to sort of do our deliberating with our meeting protocols, I have some thoughts as well on that topic.
I think we've heard from everybody. Would you have what your thoughts, Mike?
Well, it's just what I mentioned last week and then subsequently sent around to all of you. That, again, we've heard from our technical consultant about no alternative to the project versus the wording of what we have in the waiver standard about no conditions or alternatives that will allow the project to go forward as proposed. And it may be that at some point we want to have town council kind of take us through those things, because we seem to, in my view, we've been applying the standard incorrectly, and I just think it's something we should sort of sort out and decide ultimately what we want to do about it. So if the question comes down to other conditions or alternatives that would be reasonable, that would allow the project to go through as proposed, I would say that would be a question back to the architects and take us through why it has to be this way, or what you are proposing. But I don't think the question is whether or not there is an alternative to the project.
I think he was just commenting, I understand your point there, that this might or might not qualify for a net benefit. That's a different waiver request. And you can ask for whatever waivers you want and grant any kind of work done based on our best estimate as to whether there's no adverse impact, no alternatives, or a net benefit.
No alternatives that would allow the project to proceed.
In this specific case. There are
Right.
times that I think you can do no alternative. I disagree with you on the no-build alternative. I think that is an alternative we can consider. I'm not saying for this thing at all.
Alternative to the project.
Yeah, I'm not
No build,
referring
right,
to
okay.
this.
So the way we need to look at this is comparing it to the previously approved project.
Right.
I'm simply saying,
In this
Mr. Chairman,
case, yes.
Yes.
It's already been approved.
if we want to start down that road about the alternative, then we don't, I don't know if we can sort that out, or they can move the bedroom over here. We have to flip it back to the applicants and hear from them
Sure.
to flesh that out a little more. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I was just saying that if we felt that that the mitigation was appropriate for the minimal encroachment into the 25 or 30 or 31 or 32 and a half distance from the wetlands, and
Just do
we've
it under
got
that
4
waiver.
different resources, then we just issue that waiver and not even
Do you wanna
speak
do
to
that?
net benefit.
Are you
I don't
suggesting
know.
that?
I'm just saying that you could do either one.
If you're suggesting it, let's go.
Hold on, real quickly, I don't want
Yeah, let's hear what
to
Jeff
confuse
has
it,
to
is they've already been granted waivers for the projects for a structural encroachment for a building down to, from the plan of record that's on top there, down to 28 feet on the one side or whatever, on the grounds of no adverse impact, no reasonable alternative, and under net benefit. But they don't apply to both. When you read through it, the net benefit refers specifically to the revegetation of buffer zone, or in some cases, the increase in separation from a building to the wetland may be a benefit. But then the structure itself, clearly the structure itself is never a benefit to the resource area. That those are when you're looking at your no adverse impact, and I'll actually read it because we always get it wrong too, and we still get it wrong, is that there are no reasonable conditions or alternatives that would allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. So you have to have both of those things to be able to demonstrate why the project can't proceed in compliance, and then be able to demonstrate that there's no adverse impact from that. And then also you require written alternative analysis and all that fun stuff to show why that it can't continue in compliance, and to do all those things.
And you're suggesting that both waivers are needed for this?
For this project, I would say it would be prudent to have them both, because I think it's better to include things like revegetation and proper vegetation management and enhancement of buffer zones as a net benefit.
Sure.
And not as not saying that doesn't have an adverse impact, because I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
So we need to continue for alternatives analysis, is that what?
Well, let me ask a question. Do we need to reissue waivers to do the amended order?
No.
No, we've already,
We just
say that
amend
we still
those.
comply to the
Previous.
original waiver?
Correct.
Yeah, and I frankly don't see this as having a huge additional impact, or hardly.
No, I would say I totally would agree. My only question actually would for Ernie is with the switchgrass. I mean, it's a lot of switchgrass. Is that good or bad, or I
Well,
just don't know.
switchgrass it's a native plant.
So it's fine. Okay, that's I
Yes.
don't know. I'm just asking. Yeah, I think this is, certainly would fall again under an amended order.
Well, Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
I mean, it's adding components of work to the original order. I would say it's pretty classic amended order.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor of issuing this amended order?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's been a
So
while.
CERT got continued, so we're down to orders and conditions.
One second, I'll pass it around. So we got hung up with Shane. Take one and pass them around.
Medical doctor.
Maybe. Working at the MSPCA.
Yeah, yeah.
He's working up, yeah, basically, he's working up in,
He goes up.
he's building violins. He's helping lead a class for the violins. He's become so skilled at it. But if you look at my kitchen, you can see he's quite a skilled carpenter. Okay, so the first one we have here, if we're ready to go, is the land bank on 158. Oh, we're not quite there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's an extra copy too.
Everybody get one?
Did everybody get one?
Yes.
Okay, land bank, 158 Orange Street.
All right, this is one we closed last Wednesday. This was for the reconstruction of the walkway and pier on 158 Orange Street, part of the separation of the existing pier. The one thing you guys had commented that you were looking for as part of that order is that the siltation curtains be installed around the pilings for insulation and removal, for work that's there. And then also, since some of that salt marsh had been there, I kind of mirrored the order from the next door neighbor that we were required to do some replanting work of Martina in the salt marsh.
Yep, that's good.
Other than that, it pretty much reads the same as the other one.
This is the walkway that we permitted.
Correct.
Rebuild. Water extended.
Yes, this is the one that we
Rebuild
closed.
of a historic walkway that's water extended.
So,
I say to anyone has, if no one has any additions, I'd say the issue is drafted.
I would think so too. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
That was a motion, right?
Yes, there was a motion. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, MNP LLC at 17 Ames.
Yep. This is the one that was for the IA septic system that we discussed last week that Don submitted the updated plan for the pressure dosing system.
Yeah, with Ferguson, Drift Road, Oaks and...
Yeah, so the one thing that's a little bit unique about this one is the work itself is taking place within land subject to coastal storm flowage, but in no other buffer zones. So I added a finding number 2 about the bordering vegetated wetland, because there are buffer zones that enter the property from BVW that all of this work is outside of.
Okay, just as a finding.
Yep, just as a finding. And then a new condition that I've added in, since we've been having such problems with this throughout the town, is that a copy of the operation and maintenance agreement must be filed with us prior to the issuance of a certificate of compliance. Let's put it in. I broke it out a little bit differently than we had been doing it before, because the Board of Health and our office have been having trouble getting O&M agreements on some systems. So
Okay, well, good.
trying something a little different.
Unless there's any comments, we have a motion to issue this as drafted.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, and then, Wesco Capital Partners at 57 Washington.
Man, so I was kind of stumped for conditions on this one. It's pretty straightforward. planting and work in the flood zone on an existing structure.
Motion issue?
It doesn't require NHESP review, or it does? Additional findings, is that a typo or am I missing?
Oh, yeah, it's a typo. Hold on a second, it does not require.
It
Sorry.
does not. I was like, wow, why does this require?
Sorry about that.
No problem. So,
That's why we read it.
So now we have to issue as amended.
Correct.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
We did close one more tonight, Mr. Chairman. The 10 Monomoy Creek, the removal of the Gabion wall. I didn't draft an order because I wasn't sure what the discussion would take us to do that. Outside of invasive species management and some additional forbs being added, was there any other concerns that people had?
This is one we would want to require
Oh,
some photo
loam
monitoring.
sourcing.
Yeah, we'd want to see some monitoring.
Sourcing and then
Yeah.
photo monitoring after the, I think this is one where we're definitely going to
And
want to
if it
keep an
wasn't
eye on.
timed correctly, they were gonna put a winter rye or
Yeah,
something.
winter
to keep
rye.
the
Was
erosion.
there, yeah, right, we were gonna time it so that there was a chance for some germination, right?
And in particular, monitoring if they let that wetland recover naturally, if that
Yeah.
recovers.
This is one where the silt fence is super important too.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it's okay.
It'll be a- yeah.
Is there anything that, I mean, not to put the pressure on, in your experience, is there anything to be better than just plain silt fence?
And just put a silt fence at the toe of the
At the
slope.
toe of that slope, especially if we get into the winter?
What about like court rolls?
I don't know, if that is, I really think we should put a timeline on this project so that there's a chance. So the thing that would be better, yeah, would have that slope vegetated with some kind of cover. The
Yeah.
only way we're gonna get some kind of cover on it is if it's just allowed to germinate while it's still warm out. October, 10th is kind of like the cutoff.
Okay.
Well, that's getting late.
That's getting late, I mean, that's the cutoff, So, I mean, August, September. is
You want to
good.
have it where plants are kind of in by August 30th?
And they'll probably just seed it if they do.
Yeah, if they could
They
seed
do
it,
like a
after August 15th, but before, September 15th, that'd probably be ideal.
Yeah, and then there'll be sort of vegetation evident by October 15th.
Yeah, I think that's something that's
So too.
easy enough to condition where you say, any disturbed soils must be reseeded between August 15th and September 15th.
Perfect.
And
Gives
if
them a
there's,
good window.
if there's no sign of germination by, thus and so, what do we do? Like then, do they try to winter rye?
And, maybe hydroseeding is always great if they can get a mix that,
Yeah.
we can get, a winter rye or something.
Winter rye or what, or an erosion mat or something, like that,
Well,
matting or something?
Yeah,
Could put jute down and then seed over it, or?
Yeah. So I would say a erosion blanket and hydroseeding with, if they're going to be planting, can they plant through that?
It's got a fairly open.
Okay.
They
Yeah,
can
all
cover
right.
them.
So, hydroseeded between August 15th and September 15th on top of a erosion blanket, jute blanket, whatever it is usually.
Okay. Well, I think I can package that all
Okay.
together. We'll have a chance to edit it at the next
Yeah.
meeting too, so.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
The discussion, assuming they're gonna do this work this summer, I guess I was curious, if they don't do it this summer for whatever reason, do you have a start time, or can they start again in the spring? Because right now it sounds like if you don't plan it by August 15th, then you don't get to do it.
Right.
Is there some time that you want to allow them to start working?
After
this spring?
April 15th, you can.
Yeah, April 15, probably when soil temperatures are
Yeah,
going to be
that's,
warm.
when soil temperatures get to what, 52 or what is it?
Yeah, because I think it's all integral. You can't just rip this thing out and
Yeah, and hope for the best.
and hope for the best, and we'll do it next year. It just doesn't work. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's a good point, Bruce. I think it's all. The whole project has to be timed so that it can be done and completed with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I don't know if it's realistic to get an excavator in there for August 15th.
You could say that
Before
if,
August 15th.
once it lets you know when they're gonna start, say it's August 1st, and you know
Yeah.
it's gonna take 6 weeks of the project, you can say, you've got a month to get it done, or don't start it. I don't know, you know, it's
Yeah, right.
too.
Well, I think it's one of those, if we just package up that first condition dealing with the seating, that if they're not going to be able to meet that,
Then don't start the project.
then they have to wait till April 15th
Right.
of the next year.
Right.
Yeah, and that would be a perfect example of conditioning the project to meet the
Yeah.
performance standards. So, yep,
Fair
that's,
enough. Good.
that'll be a new kind of condition for us, but I think we can put language together that makes some good sense for that.
Well, that's what they have to do on the dredging, for instance,
Yeah.
because of the winter flounder and
Yeah.
Well, it's under
eelgrass.
warm, you have piping
All
flow
the
around the beach,
restrictions
it's the same kind of
Yeah.
timing, so it's
It's
not
tight
unheard of.
timing.
It's just gonna take some logistics on their end to figure out, you know, if the excavator can start, you know, the day after
I
they
mean,
get their
it's not
permit.
that big a deal. It's
No.
just- it's not that big a project.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, then
One
let's
tough
go.
week and they can get it done.
Anything else that we?
Did we close 155?
No, we continue that one. We had to wait for natural heritage on that one.
Was that, do we already know what we wanted on that? No, or is that one we have to read?
No, we're just waiting to hear from natural heritage on that, but we didn't have a lot of discussion on that.
Right, that's what I was saying. I mean, okay.
Okay. So, other business, approval of minutes.
A lot of question marks in the minutes.
Yeah, there were a lot of.
There was one correction we also need to make too, that Bruce caught, that Brian Madden is listed as an employee of Laurentide Environmental
Mhm.
and not of LEC Environmental.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're a little shocked there, you're like, what?
Brian wasn't happy about that. He didn't want to be traded.
He's traded to the Cleveland Brown. Yeah, it says with purple upgrass and question marks. I'd like to see it replanted with question marks.
And what was that? Was it fescue or something, wasn't it?
I don't know. Whenever they start naming vegetation. No, I think you're right. I think it was a fescue.
It was fescue. So occasionally why we leave them, because I'm not going to read.
This is purchase and under the square footage thresholds for, that's probably for Corps of Engineers.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the second question mark on page, what?
Which one was that?
It's page 2 of 7. You have question marks and it says, it's like a game. This is a public document under the square footage thresholds for the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yep, and that's the last one. And then as requested, Michael's memo is attached to the back.
So if that's all the corrections, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, thanks. Okay, reports. CPC.
Nothing new to report.
NPVDC's gone. Mosquito Control Committee.
Nothing
Okay, anything else? Well, this is not an official committee, but I guess I can bring it up under Commissioner comments, which isn't on here anymore.
Oh, yeah, we still got to get Commissioner comments on here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You should retire listening to us, I understand.
What about applications?
Application fees, I actually do have an update on that, amazingly enough. I don't necessarily have a little grid, but my prompting with a few other ones has actually kind of started up a look by MACC on what commissions are charging. So our little start of looking at our application fees has kind of started more of a snowball of what everyone in kind of the Commonwealth is charging for fees.
Wow.
So we might have a lot more comprehensive thing to look at once they kind of spec that out and they get a hold of everyone very quickly. So they'll compile it and hopefully we'll have that quicker. So
Does it help us to have a budget as far as a breakdown? I know this is going to be too business-like, but if we were going to have an enforcement officer help you or cover half the J.C.'s pay or whatever, if we could get an idea of the number of applications each year And am I think too far down the track? In other words, let's say we're raising it from $25 to $250.
Well,
we get 10 applications a week. That's enough to pay for.
The fee that we would be looking at to do that wouldn't be the $25 bylaw fee, because that $25 bylaw fee disappears into the abyss of the general fund. The one that we'd be looking to change would be the third party, the other fee that we charge to the Concom revolver, and that's what we pay for our technical review out of. That would be the fee that would be best to adjust for that kind of personnel. But we could certainly provide exactly how many, I mean, we track how many filings we do a year, do those things.
Yeah, I mean, just ballparky.
So we do have a new enforcement person on the budget as of the 1st of July.
A new budget hawk?
So we'll have someone new, but they're specializing in fertilizer enforcement. So
Well, this is something
someone
that
that can
maybe
just drive
we
around
could
all day,
yeah.
every day, and just harangue anyone with a landscape vehicle. So,
It's gonna be easy for them.
so
Wouldn't this be a good joint type of thing?
Siren.
it would. It's just we have to figure out how to do it because you don't find a lot of people that necessarily have all of the skills, or you spend so much time doing fertilizer enforcement that to catch up on Concom things sometimes can be very difficult. So it's kind of a full-time job for both. It's just there's so many of all of them. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that there are probably far more violations of the Wetlands Protection Act than we know of, just from overcuttings or all kinds of things.
There's just so many things,
Can
yeah.
you get a drone
But it's the
to
same.
your department?
No, that would be creepy.
Yeah, what?
It's like get a drone to your department.
But it's the same thing. I'm sure there's just as many.
You want to
you know,
operate it too, don't you?
Watching
You want to
Drones
run it.
that can look at greenness in lawns and go.
Oh, they do this, what they
Oh,
use
they do
LiDAR
that,
for,
yeah.
yeah.
The LiDAR.
That's really
That's
good.
self-vegetation.
If you don't
I'm
mind.
just looking at my window, but
I used to have.
Follow me around all day.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm bored, yeah. Who would spend
The
that
whole
kind of
public can
money?
see inside my window every day.
What did,
Okay, I just had a comment. We had some questions about invasive species regulations and education for the commission, and we had a invasive species committee meeting the other day, and
Just yesterday.
we've got a couple of people on island. Sarah Trainer Boyce out of the Loring Foundation. I mean, she basically did her PhD working with the people in Connecticut who are like New England's registered, recognized experts. And she then worked with those guys for a while doing invasive species. So she is truly a bona fide expert on invasive species and their control. And she's right here on island. And we've heard in the past, too, from Kelly Ullman, who has worked in this field for a long time, including with the National Park Service and things, with, controlling invasives up in Maine, I think, mostly. So she's quite good, too. And then we talked about perhaps trying to, if the commission wants somebody from the state, of trying to get Tim Simmons out here. And then I don't know what the commission wants is to have.
Reviewing our list, or what's the?
Yeah, what do we want to do? Have a review of control measures? Is that the big concern of what do we, if we're doing appropriate control, or?
To kind of rewind back in time, I think some of the concerns that came up last time we were looking at our regs is one, methods of control and how we're managing those, but also one of the big ones that we had difficulty tackling is how we're evaluating what is invasive and what is not invasive outside of the list, because not everything, as we know, is equal. I mean, not to use the comparisons we always use, but the sycamore maples on Main Street in Wisconsin are on the list, but when people come in for applications, we don't ask them to be removed. I mean, it's
Well, not to remove them, but if they came in and said we wanted to plant some, we'd really have to say, no, you
Yes.
cannot plant
Or
this.
the other one is-
though, on that particular, that's the whole. that
Well,
is the
because
whole
why
example.
can't you run a red light if there's nobody coming? You just can't.
No.
It's the law.
Well, if we're going to go by the law, that would be wonderful, if we could all agree that's what we're going to do. That's wonderful. When we get to the Nantucket, invasive species identification, and that's an excellent example. And I have a couple of other favorites. We all have our favorite ones that work with plants. But there's a plant that is invasive in suburban America and in many places. And on Nantucket, as a street tree in Wisconsin, it's about the only thing that will survive. And I don't know that it functions invasively in Wisconsin. And this is where what my original question to some of you, or there were a few of us, when was that?
Well, you can't buy it, Mike. You can't go out and buy sycamore maple in Massachusetts. It's illegal to buy.
So my question was just about the procedure by which things get put onto
And see, that's Kelly's.
the Nantucket invasive species list. And I know that you all talked about there's a kind of a private committee that meets, and I had said that it's not a government agency, and that when we're restricting people's rights to do things, we want to make sure that we follow a due process before we kind of come to, you can't do this. And so the sycamore maple is an example, and there are a few other plants that are, and I think that as time progresses, there'll be more and more candidates for invasive species list, and there are degrees of invasiveness, and I don't think it's appropriate to have a non-governmental agency have sort of purview over what becomes the law, and then have us run around saying you can't run the red light because somebody said so in a private interest meeting.
Well, and for the folks that missed that, I mean, Kelly did come and present all, and I think she should redo this. She came and presented all these other lists and showed her thought process for why they're listed on our Nantucket local. And she said, here's the Connecticut list, here's the Massachusetts list, here's the 20 other legal entities that would recognize. So she explained, and then we can agree with her or not. Then it's presented in an open form.
Nevertheless, it was one individual with these various saying this is what everybody else is doing. So therefore, and it's not a government agency. So what we decided to do at that time was say, well, let's just kind of not fiddle with the list we have, but let's be sure that as things are added, that they go through a due process to be added. My concern about all this is that some plants that are unpopular get labeled invasive for convenience, and some plants that are by definition invasive but are popular just don't get on the list, and so the list is not objective or technical. It becomes political. And
well, first of all, Mike, we're not saying you can't plant sycamore maple on the main street in Wisconsin because there's no wetlands there. We're not saying you can't plant these on Nantucket.
I'm using that only as an example of that species. There are other species. The Rugosa rose is kind of a fun one as well, where in the state of Maine they said, well, it's of such economic importance to the tourists that we'll pretend it isn't invasive.
But I think Kelly didn't use any I mean, I think that was the point she was trying to make, and maybe it didn't come across as well. And she's the chair, so it's...
She said what she said.
Well, we've got advocates that are single human beings that come here, and it's whether you feel their expertise is significant, which is what Ernie was alluding to.
And whether we go by the law.
And in this case, with both Kelly and Sarah here, presenting Conn College, presenting all this academic proof. And then we can accept it or not, based on our expertise.
I still like the idea.
I don't think it's a treatment.
Of creating, maybe I can find a couple other people to come and have 3 or 4 people come and just do a specific workshop on invasive species that's posted for you guys to attend.
Yeah, I think the treatment was I did think the treatment was a big part of it that we wanted to get.
Yeah, we could cover, I mean, there's a lot of people that have expertise in removal. I mean, I know, as for aside, there was a project done by Nantucket Bank years and years ago where someone was using more of a mechanical method to remove Japanese knotweed from the site. That was fairly successful. But there's lots of different varieties and stuff we don't see that those people are available as resources for us, and some good on-island ones. But I think 3 or 4 people is kind of as a panel to talk about how they do it and what they're looking at. And most of those people tend to be pretty involved in their communities too, and how their lists come together with the state. We can set that up relatively quickly. So is summer a good time to do that for everyone, or would you guys rather do that in the fall?
I would do it in the fall.
I mean, invasive species aren't going anywhere, so.
I don't think the people that need to speak would have the time to come speak.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll try to package something up then for the fall.
Let's definitely have them address the Rugosa rose when they do it.
I'll forget
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Administrator, do you have anything else from the commission?
No, that's not a
Do we have other enforcement orders that we need to discuss?
Some species of
At
cricket, I
the
don't
moment,
know
no.
if all species of cricket are.
Do we need to be, just going to the timeliness, it's not your fault a little bit, it's our fault for not keeping up on things, should be, how can we best address enforcement orders like the one we had tonight? That was, we first started talking about July, and then they talked about it when we get in October, and then February.
It's the hard part with enforcement orders. All of them are a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
for what it is. I mean, it's a lot different when you're dealing with someone that cuts down a bunch of vegetation to replant or regrow or do those things, as opposed to building a coastal engineering structure. I mean, this one was a little longer than some of them. Some of them have gone very quickly. Sometimes it's a matter of response from someone that's there. I wish there was an easy answer to that question, but I mean, I think it's more helpful early on enforcement orders to get to a better sense of what needs to happen in the immediate time frame quicker. And I think looking back at this one and with my instructions from tonight, I think those are certainly instructions we probably could have put together shortly thereafter of issuing that enforcement order, as opposed to waiting for now, and then dealt with subsequent filings or things with that already in place and those things already in motion, as opposed to trying to
Sure, well, it would save the applicant money too. I'm just wondering if there's a spreadsheet, if we should start saying that every time we report one, it goes into a spreadsheet and we review that once a month, or I don't know.
I think we should start putting them in the newspaper myself. But
I'm all for that too. Fine with me.
Can I ask a question about that? Maybe it's inappropriate, but I think that that's a great idea. I'm wondering if there is a master list of ongoing violations that are being investigated. Whether enforcement order's been issued or not, maybe that's something you could post in the packet every week, and then the commission could ask you about it if they want to.
I think that's great.
Neighbors are more likely to, like, check in and be aware.
Well, I mean, it helps me remember. I can't remember all the things I
I
brought
don't
up.
remember them at all.
But I get the phone
We must
calls.
be near adjourning here.
Huh?
So no, absolutely, we can try for next week. I can refine it down, take out some of my weird notes that are on it. But I do keep a list.
WTF is the
colorful presentation.
I don't know if they're colorful. Some of them are more interesting than others, though.
Oh, Jeff, do you have anything else?
Just as a reminder, no one that anyone's here, our office is closed on July the 3rd, so the filing deadline is Thursday, July the 2nd.
Do we have any idea who have the selectmen voted yet?
No, that is tonight, though, so good luck to anyone who...
Nobody's got any texts?
Fine.
No, I
Nobody's
haven't.
heard any messages?
Tonight? Tonight that does happen?
Yeah, over here, it's
Right now? Happening right now?
So,
Yeah.
You're telling me.
I'll find out. All right, but we need to make a motion to adjourn.
Well, and even if you guys either of you should happen to get booted, we should still have a little going away party at our next meeting.
We'll do something.
Because on the next meeting, if one of us gets booted, we don't have to come, right?
That is correct.
Well, we'll have to return. Go over some of the highlights of the...
Oh, yes, yeah, we can reenact, do a talk show.
Yeah, get some highlights.
Have we adjourned yet, so we can stop
So,
taping?
yes, yes.
Okay. Do we
Move
vote?
to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I guess we're adjourned.
It's close enough.
Before we say something horrible.
Yeah.
Yes,
no
I hope
kidding.
so too.